Welcome to the show where we unearth new ways of looking at ever-evolving life around the world, seen from a number of different industries, cultures, and backgrounds. But there's one thing that unites everyone I speak to. They all want to do their part to make the world better in their own unique ways. It's a uniting passion. Whether they're from the commercial world, third sector, or public sector, from the global north or the global south, my name is Philippa White, and welcome to TIE Unearthed. Hello, and welcome to episode 33 of TIE Unearthed. Today, I'm speaking with my friend Juliana Xavier, Director of Brand Management at Yara International, with more than 15 years of international experience in brand, marketing, design, and employee engagement. And we'll be talking about responsibly feeding the world and protecting the planet. After more than 10 years working as an account executive in advertising for brands such as PepsiCo and P&G, she took an unexpected move to Oslo, Norway for love. And with that came the opportunity to start new. With a great passion for ideas and their power to engage people and inspire change, Juliana wanted to use her communication skills to do work that could have a positive impact and contribute to a better future. Today at Yara, a global crop nutrition company, she works every day to raise awareness on the impact the way we produce food today has on the climate, how agriculture is as much a big part of the problem as it is an essential part of the solution, and how Yara is working to live up to its mission to responsibly feed the world and protect the planet. We'll be talking about everything from digital farming tools to improve the efficiency and sustainability of food production to the hope Juliana finds in the many innovations, investments, and partnerships happening today to tackle the greatest challenge of our time, climate change. So grab that favorite beverage or throw on those running shoes and enjoy this chat with Juliana. Hi, Juliana. It is so wonderful to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Really nice to be here, Philippa.
I'm so excited. It's great. So tell me, you are where right now?
I'm in Oslo right now. Yes, all the way up in Norway.
So we go way back and have lots in common. We were put in touch by Senta, who is a very good friend of both of ours, and that was so many years ago now. We both worked at Leo Burnett. You're Brazilian, and I live in Brazil. And yet I think what connected us and the reason why we've just been so in contact so much over all of these years is our joint desire to want to make the world a better place. And we've been doing that in our own unique ways over the last numerous years. So talk to us about your background. Talk to us about how you got to Norway. We'll talk about what you're doing in a second, but talk to us a bit about you and how you got to where you're at.
Sure. Well, it's quite a winding road. It's definitely not a straight line. And I mean, I don't know how far you want me to go, but I ended up where I am, but it's sort of like never in a million years I would have imagined that I would, be living in Norway today. It was never in the plans, and even doing what I'm doing and working where I'm working. When I left, when I had to apply for university and all that, I wanted to be a diplomat. So I actually started international relations, which has nothing to do with advertising, marketing, or communication. But I got very quickly I realized that my idea of diplomacy and that world was very idealized. I did finish the course because I liked the subject, and there is actually a lot from that I use to this date. I think that is relevant, but I decided, okay, this is not really where I want to make a career because it's not quite what I had expected. Well, coming from Brazil, you probably understand why that was the turn, is because I realized that if I wanted to be a diplomat for Brazil, it was going to be a very messy process. And as the diplomat, you serve the government that is on. It's not, you're not chosen by the government. So you just imagine if I had,
pursued that. Bolsonaro.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So, and then it really advertising happened completely by chance, and it was part of a crisis, really, because I had finished university, had gone through a breakup. I was completely lost. I didn't know what I was going to do left. And I had a cousin that happened to be working at UMAP Video, which is part of one of the biggest network of agencies at the time, and they needed someone to just cover for someone that was going to be on holidays, and I took it, and then I stayed. I really enjoyed it because I like design and film and communication and all that was there for me. And the good thing with BBDO or MAP BBDO is that being an international network, I could go abroad. So I went and I did an internship at BBDO in London. And I really liked it, and I decided, okay, I want to go back. So eventually I did move to London to study, and it was supposed to be like a 3-month thing, but then I got the job at Leo Burnett, and that's how that took me there. But 5 years later, I started getting a little bit, impatient as well, because, oh my God, I'm using all this to sell, soda, and because I used to work with Pepsi, the account. It just kind of didn't feel right. Then when I moved to Leo Burnett, I started working with P&G, and it was always on Tampax. In fact, I think that's
we both worked on always. That's another one. I didn't have that on the list of things that we have in common, but I personally adored working on that account for so many reasons, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but amazing.
So for a while, that was like, okay, now I feel I'm actually, doing something great here, because after all, women do need the tampons, the sanitary pads.
And the difference between the cultural differences of how women around the world deal with menstruation.
Exactly.
Like that I found so eye-opening. So yeah, absolutely.
So that was great. But I think after 5 years, more or less, I was just like, okay, what is the next move? So I was ready to try something else. And I honestly that's also when I came across your work, because Leo Burnett was one of the first ones, if not the first one, worked with Ty. And I helped Chris with his fundraising so he could go. I think he was the first one.
He was the first one. He was the first ever one. Chris Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, who was that? I don't remember who went after that. And then I helped put together. Yeah, it was Ed, and I helped put together a carnival party at Leo Burnett to raise funds for him to go. So, then I was like, wow, this is sort of like, got me thinking again, is that like a better way to do all this? And then eventually what happened really was that I met Jacob, who I'm with until now. He happens to be Swedish, and he was living in Oslo. So at some point, it was just sort of like the perfect time, because I was already looking for a move. So I ended up taking the leap. Okay, let's go to Oslo and see what happens. So that's how I ended up where I am today.
And you're a surfer, just a really sort of as an aside. You do surf, don't you?
I try. I cannot claim that, because if Jacob or any of my friends who really surf
listen to this,
they're just going to laugh. But I try, and I have actually surfed in Norway as well, which is a massive achievement for a Brazilian.
So now talk to us about Yara and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so Yara. Well, Yara is a company that has its origins in Norway. Therefore, the headquarters are here. And I think for me, I need to go a little bit back to the history, because most of your listeners are not going to know Yara and not going to know this. And it's quite cool, actually, because it connects to where we are today. So Yara had 3 founders, and one of them, Christian Birkeland, he was a scientist, a Norwegian scientist, who was really into sort of like understanding the Northern Lights. And he did a lot of the theories that he had at the time. He was ridiculized, but later on is then accepted and were sort of like quite breakthrough for some of the stuff that we understand today about the magnetic field and so on. But one of the things that he discovered was how we could capture nitrogen from the air, and that through that process make fertilizer. And this happened, it was like 1905, and Europe was going through big famine crisis. People were going hungry, and the farmers were not able to produce enough food. So it was a really breakthrough innovation at the time. And this is really where the whole agriculture evolution started. Most people attribute that to, I think it's a German that came afterwards that developed a new way to produce fertilizer, which is the way we produce today. It's called the Haber-Bosch. But the breakthrough that it's possible and figuring out how to do that capture of nitrogen and making fertilizer was Christian Birkeland, who is one of the founders of Yara. Now, it's more than 100 years now, and obviously a lot has changed since then. And today, Yara is a lot more than a fertilizer company. I can talk a little bit more about that. But that's where it all started.
Do you want to talk a bit more about what else Yara does, just to kind of put it into perspective,
yes,
just so that people can understand?
Yeah, so absolutely. So it started there, and today Yara works with more than 20 million farmers worldwide. And through the work that and that connection with the farmers is obviously you have the fertilizer product, but there is a lot of agronomic knowledge exchange. We have a network of agronomists that engage with the farmers and help them identify the best crop nutrition plans for their crops. We work with, we have now expanded into digital solutions so that we can actually digitize that knowledge and scale it up, because you can't have, millions of agronomists everywhere, but you can digitize that knowledge and make it available in the form of the digital applications. As one example, the other types of digital applications that we do. And that work today helps feed, we calculate that our work today with the farmers help feed about 262 million people in the world. And it's connected with the mission and the vision of the company. And I think that's very special for Yara. So if you ask any employee in the company, they will be able to quote the mission and the vision without thinking. So responsibly feed the world and protect the planet, that's the mission. And the vision is that of a collaborative society, a world without hunger, and a planet respected, because we think that no one can tackle these issues alone, and so we need collaboration. And that's really the core of everything that guides the company moving forward.
So I know that getting messages of Yara out to the public is actually kind of hard. Like, you internally are so busy, and obviously you say that everybody within the company knows the mission and the vision. But I know that you mentioned that agronomists, for example, even in Norway, they don't even know a lot of what Yara is doing. And also we know that food and climate change are very connected, aren't they? Your industry your industry contributes to it. But also is greatly affected by it. So obviously it's in your best interest to get that under control. I'm just really keen to know, what should people know? And I'm aware that this is like hugely loaded. There's tons that you can talk about, but hit us with some of this information, because I just think, what if an agronomist is listening to this, what should they know about Yara? If the general person is listening to this, they've read the IPCC report, they're freaking out, understandably, about big business. It's not about talk anymore, it's about doing. There's so much there. And I'll probably start picking things to try and sort of help unearth this, but talk to us about it.
Yeah. So I'll try to, let's see how I can organize this in a structured way. So you're absolutely right. The way we have been producing food has come at a tremendous cost to the world and the environment and the climate. So whereas Christian Birkeland's breakthrough was really important to tackle the famine situation in Europe at that time and to be able to produce enough food to feed the world today, the way it evolved and how the modern current agricultural system and food system operates is not sustainable. So it's like, it just went into a direction that is, well, today agriculture is, if I'm not mistaken, responsible for 20% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in the world. To add complex is that people need to eat. So it's not like it's going, okay, let's produce less food. No, in fact, the UN projects that we're going to hit 9.8 billion people in the world by 2050, and to be able to feed that people, we need to double the amount of food that we produce. And I think that is taken into consideration as well, that we are not wasting food, because part of the problem is that there is a lot of waste in the way that the value chain works. So yes, agriculture is a big part of the problem, but it's also because of that part of the solution. And what is interesting is that the farmers are also really impacted by what is happening, right? Because, I mean, this year, for example, Brazil had, I think, one of the most severe winters they ever had, if not
totally. I mean, in the south, it snowed and it was minus. Here, actually, the northeast of Brazil, I've never seen this amount of rain. It's just raining constantly. Hasn't stopped for a month.
Yeah, so the impact of that, and this is, it's happening right now. The impact of that is that many coffee farmers in Brazil, and Brazil is the biggest exporter of coffee, many coffee farmers have lost their crops, their harvest this year. And that will have an impact on the price of coffee in the world as well. So it's like a domino effect. So some of that, we can help farmers with some of that because, for example, we have digital solutions that help them anticipate some of the weather patterns so that they can plan their harvest and the crop nutrition plan and all that. But of course, not everything, because, and that's the other thing, farming used to be a lot based on knowledge that was passed on from generation to generation. It's a very sort of like family type of business. And that, trail of knowledge is being broken because of climate change, because, the patterns that existed in the past don't happen anymore.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, it's contributing to the problem. It's being impacted by the problem, and it has the potential to be a big part of the solution.
So back to my question then, if you were talking to an agronomist, what would you tell them about what Yara is doing to help decrease the impact on climate change through what you're doing?
Farmers, they are very different across the world and they have very different concerns. There's more farmers today also looking at regenerative agriculture, and organic is also getting a lot of attention. But the more traditional farmer, and a farmer in Brazil or in the US or Europe, especially in Europe, they will get hit by regulation. Europe just released their Green Deal, and their targets for how they are going to meet their commitments to the climate agreement. And that is putting pressure on farmers because they will need to show that they are using a less amount of fertilizer, and there will be more regulation limiting what type of fertilizers they can use, and what is the impact of what they are doing. So, for example, one of the things we are working on so many different fronts, but this year we launched an initiative. It's called the Agrocarbon Alliance. It's a system to help farmers, to create a marketplace for farmers that can produce food with less CO2. And so they can get CO2 credits or carbon credits, and then they can use that in sort of like a carbon marketplace. And that's a way to recognize that farmer for having a more sustainable agricultural practice. Because the farmer today does not get a premium for harvesting or cultivating land in a way that is better for the environment. There is no incentive to a farmer to do that. And it's often more expensive today to do it that way as well.
So how do you respond to that? Because actually it's interesting. One of the organizations that we work with in Brazil, Yara International, and we did a podcast with Binka, who's the co-founder a good few months ago now, and it was actually one of the projects that we worked on in January with Thai Accelerator. For the last 30 years, I mean, their mission is how to keep trees in the ground. So, and how to incentivize landowners, farmers, that to keep the trees in the ground, because we as a population need the trees in the ground for obvious reasons. But what is the incentive for a landowner? How can they make money having trees in the ground? Because they would rather sell or plant coffee or sugarcane or whatever else they need to plant to be able to make a living. How does Yara respond to this? In the sense that on one hand, you're a fertilizer company, or actually you're a chemical company. And actually that's another question that I have, but you're a chemical company, but you work with fertilizers. And we know that the chemicals, also the food production, contributes to the issues that we face on a global scale from a climate change point of view. But at the same time, obviously, the farmers are impacted by that. So it's in Yara's best interest for those impacts to be decreased, but there's no incentives for the farmers. Does Yara have a responsibility in this? Is Yara on the front foot? How do you respond? How do you respond if there's no incentives, but yet you're aware that for the future of our planet, but for the future of these farmers, things need to get better? And actually just to touch on that as well, because also as a general, just a sort of normal person on the ground, looking at big business, reading the IPCC report, it freaks me out, and it's freaking out a lot of other people, that really it is big business that is causing this. And it really is only big business that can stop it. And we have no more time for talk. So we have no more time for okay, well, we should try this. And yes, it would be good to do this. How is Yara leading the way? How is Yara responding to this? And how do you respond to criticisms?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I hope I remember all the parts of that so I can respond. But it is really complex because, for us, it always starts with the farmer, and we want to make it, the farmer is, in the end, the center customer for us. But we're all into this sort of like larger system, which is the food system. So we also work with food companies, but one of the things we're looking at now is organic fertilizer that can be made from waste that is from using the fertilizer. So you take the waste from the soil, from the water, from the value chain, and then you use that to make new fertilizer that is organic. But also advising the farmers to use good and precision technique for farming. So, for example, one misconception many people have, and I probably had the same misconception before I started working for Yara, that they tend to put fertilizer and pesticides, everything sort of like in the same bucket, and they are not. Pesticide is a chemical that you spray on the plant to kill a pest or something, but fertilizer is a nutrient that the crop needs to grow healthy. So it's put on the soil, and then the crop absorbs that nutrient from the soil, and it grows with good quality, and you have a good harvest. Now, of course, depending on the type of practice you have, if you put too much, if you do too much monoculture, you can deplete the soil from those nutrients, and then you become, every time you have to put more and more and more. If you put too much fertilizer, then you can also create leakage. So then you have runoffs to water, and you have runoffs to the soil and pollution. But there are ways that you can, for example, say exactly how much the crop needs, and and solutions to be able to apply exactly just how much that soil needs. In fact, and this is something I didn't know, it was the agronomist in Yara that told me that at some point the curve, when you're putting fertilizer or doing sort of a crop nutrition program on a crop, is that it's sort of like a curve that at some point it starts going down. So you put much, and then it becomes too much, and the effect is actually the opposite of what you want. So that type of education with the farmer as well is important. But some of the solutions we develop and we try to work with the farmers is, like using less, putting it to grow more. So in fact, sort of like being able to grow the same amount that you would grow if you had to, cut down those trees. But you actually can just grow as much with 1/3 of the land, and with 1/3 of the water, for example. If I remember correctly, a couple of years ago, I actually worked on a project where the crop nutrition program we had developed was making, I don't remember now if it was citrus plants or coffee plants, healthier, so that the farmers didn't have to use the pesticides. So you can do that with crop nutrition program. But it's just so many, Philip, I could go on.
No, I know. There's so many moving parts. I think when you talked about the founder of Yara in 1905 and how he had discovered this incredible way to grow food at scale, and that feels like it was quite a revolutionary thing at the time. And I kind of feel like we are almost back to that stage in the world again, in the sense that that was a very pivotal moment, but also quite a revolutionary invention. And that obviously created the success of Yara and where Yara then went to. It feels like we need something else like that now. And I guess my question is, when Yara is doing the projections for the future, by 2050, okay, we're going to have double the amount of food. And when we also do the projections around climate change, so where the world is going to be, how much we need to decrease as far as emissions. The agricultural industry is contributing 20%. So therefore, we are going to decrease by however much so that we can ensure that our contribution is decreased. Are those conversations being had? And are those, because I can imagine this is an amazing opportunity for anybody who's wanting to find the next innovative solution to the agricultural industry. Do you feel, as someone who is as concerned about all of this as I am, do you feel like those conversations are happening and that those solutions are being found?
Yes, absolutely. And I was smiling when you were saying, I feel like we're back to Kirsten Birkeland. And it's funny because, as I told you, he found a way to sequester the nitrogen from the air. And then came Haber-Bosch, which is the way we produce fertilizer today. The way we produce fertilizer today requires natural gas. So that means it releases a lot of CO2. From that 20% that I told you, which is the contribution of agriculture to greenhouse gas emissions, about 4% comes from the production of fertilizer. 40% comes from deforestation, which is connected to the organization you work with. So they're right, stopping deforestation is really, really important. But 4% comes from the production of fertilizer. So when Birkeland found a way to capture nitrogen from the air to make fertilizer, they used hydropower, which is a renewable energy source. So we are actually now working on projects to retrofit our plants. So we have one in Norway here in Porsgrunn, so that we can produce fertilizer the way it was produced before at that time. It's more complicated than that, but yes. Basically the result of that is actually producing green fertilizer or fertilizer without CO2 emissions. And it's funny because it's actually going back to how it used to be back then. The problem with that, and the reason why we don't do it that way before, is because it's really costly. It's really, it costs a lot of money to do it that way. And then it sort of like connects to the question you had asked me before as well. Yes, big, businesses, they really need to lead the way here, but there's only so much that business can do and influence consumers and their own stakeholders. We need regulation. We need the government, because the government can also create the necessary environment for certain things to flourish. Yeah. So in this case, for example, to be able to make a green fertilizer business model possible, it's not feasible for Yara to do that. The cost is so high that we wouldn't be able to just pass it on and dilute it in the value chain. It would end up with a product on the shelf that would be too expensive for the end consumer to buy. So you need support from the government to invest in those projects until they become viable. Another thing that would be interesting to see is a CO2 label on food and products that we find on the shelves of the supermarket. So like, for example, when you buy your granola or your muesli or your loaf of bread, just as you can see the nutritional values on the back of the packaging, that you could also see the carbon footprint of that product. And that would obviously help consumers to make more informed choices when it comes to the climate impact of what they are buying and consuming. That is a lot more transparent than green labels, for example. Yeah.
And are those conversations happening?
Yes. Yeah. So, and here we work very closely with them. We have several, and we work very closely with Unearthed, which is the development agency, the Norwegian development agency. And we also work with others in the private sector and with organizations as well, like the World Food Program, the WWF. So we partner with them. And one thing, we work with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is a council of business focused on what business can do for sustainable development. So the conversations are happening, absolutely.
I've got so many other questions for you. We're coming to the end of this. I wanted to ask you so many things about other projects that you've worked on with Yara over the years that's impacting the world, and we just don't really have time. So we might have to get you on another podcast. But I feel like what does give you hope? What keeps you up at night worrying, but what gives you hope?
I was discussing this with Jacob yesterday, and what keeps me up at night is my kids, literally. Because they literally do not let me sleep. But also because it always goes back to, what is the world that they're gonna inherit it from us. It was weird when Lucas was born. He was born in 2016, February 2016. So that's when Trump became the president. And it's also when Brexit happened. And I remember I was on maternity leave at the time, and I was following all this and waking up to the news that Trump had won. And I literally started crying, and I was breastfeeding. And I was just telling him, I'm so sorry I brought you to this world because I don't know what is going to happen. It was such sort of like a primal response to the whole thing, but it's sort of like really, I just could see that we were gonna lose so much time, and then after that, the year after that, it was Brazil. Didn't get much better. But on the other hand, they also give me hope because the younger generation, they don't know a world without climate change. They're not questioning it anymore, and that's the reality. They know it's a lot more real for them. So I think that the barriers for them to do what needs to be done is a lot lower. And I doubt Lucas and Edis are ever going to drive a fossil fuel car. And I wonder if they're even going to eat real meat, because there's so much going on in synthetic food. And so I think, there's so much innovation. I read the other day, I think it was in the New York Times, that last year, the businesses and the inventions and the startups that got the most investment from investment funds and the investors community were related to innovation that can tackle climate change. And that is a massive shift. So that is really, really positive.
I would love to know if there's anything that I haven't asked you. I did, we've had a conversation, obviously a few conversations before this, and there were a few things that we talked about, and I don't know if you've touched on everything in this yet. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you or that you haven't said that you think is just really important for the listeners to understand?
Oh, it's difficult. There's so much.
I know. We're scratching the surface with this. I'm aware of it.
Yeah, I'm trying about two things, but there's one thing I wanted to say. Like when I talk about how much food we need to produce to feed the world. One thing I didn't know until I joined Yara was that the majority of the people that go to bed hungry every single night are smallholder farmers. So, and that to me is such a crazy fact, that farmers that are the ones producing food to feed the world are the majority of those that go to bed hungry. So obviously this is mostly smallholder farmers and, don't have access to input and to the means they need to be able to produce at a larger scale and have, and make a living out of that. So like farmers in many places, like in Africa, those challenges that we described with the farmer in Brazil growing coffee, they are going through the same challenges. But the difference is that when they lose a harvest, that means they don't have food. And that is the difference between them being, like subsistence farmers to going below the poverty line.
Yeah.
So last year when COVID hit, as I said, we worked with the World Food Program and our CEO in a conversation with David Beasley, who is the head of the World Food Program, asked, is there anything we can do? And Beasley said, well, you need to get your product to the farmers in Africa. So we donated 40,000 tons of fertilizer to farmers in specific regions in Africa where we have operations and where we have network. And what was amazing about that was that it wasn't just the fertilizer donation. We wanted to make sure that we could secure that the farmer that was entitled to receive that fertilizer received that fertilizer, and that none of the bags got lost in the black market or anything. So for the first time, we managed to track the fertilizer from our plant in Norway all the way to the farmer in Africa.
Really?
And that, as far as we know, nobody has ever managed to do that before. And this is really good for everything we're trying to do, because it means now that we have a technology that enables others to also, if we can track the fertilizer, it has all sorts of consequences for the food value chain. It means, suddenly you can have more visibility on the CO2 emissions and the ways that a certain product was produced and so on. But so that was that. And through that, we also managed to connect, because we needed a way to identify the farmers and deliver that fertilizer to the farmers. So we worked with our retailers and the World Food Program and their partners on the ground. And we developed this digital platform. And through that digital platform, we could connect to 2 million smallholder farmers. So those smallholder farmers, they can get agronomic knowledge in that digital platform. So they learn what's the best way to use the fertilizer they received. And we've been following some of those farmers, and some of them have doubled or tripled their harvest this year.
Wow!
And we estimate that this has helped feed about 1 million people for a year in Africa.
Wow. It's a good story to end on. I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate your time. And thank you for what you're doing and keep getting that message out.
Oh, no, well, thank you. As I told you, I'm so honored to be here talking to you, Philip. And I'm the biggest fan of the work you do. I think what you're doing with Thai is just so amazing, and how you have pivoted as well in the middle of the pandemic. I know we've talked so many times, how we can scale this up, how does we make this business model, and then suddenly hits the pandemic, and there is a silver lining on all that is that, that happened, and it's so inspiring. It's so important. So it's really an honor to be here talking to you, and thanks for also, landing your platform to tell these stories.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will connect again very soon.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now this is your chance to get involved with Thai. If you work in the commercial world, whatever your profession, your position, or your experience, then Thai could be for you. You may have been in business for decades, but have always felt there's another way. Or you may just have a few years experience, but want to do more. Equally, if you want to create game-changing employees and see your company impact the world, we've got you covered. Thai has never been more necessary than right now, and you can be a part of it. Reach out to me at philippa@theinternationalexchange.co.uk and I can tell you more. Or join the Thai Accelerator info session for more information. apply.thaiaccelerator.com. Better leaders, better companies, better world. I'm your host, Philippa White. This podcast has been co-produced by Berna Vieira and me, music by Berna Vieira, and artwork by Kelps Vahais. I hope we'll meet again soon.